In May of 1945, the streets of London swelled with pure relief. The Nazi war machine had finally been dismantled, and massive crowds poured into Trafalgar Square to celebrate the survival of the free world. But away from the cheering crowds, the British government faced a terrifying reality. The bombs that rained down during the Blitz had shattered the nation's infrastructure, and the immense cost of fighting a total war across multiple continents had left the treasury completely empty. Britain had won, but they were entirely bankrupt. To keep their military functioning and their citizens fed, the British had to purchase their survival on credit. They accepted massive shipments of weapons, food, and supplies from the United States, digging themselves into an unimaginable mountain of debt. The United States supplied this lifeline as a highly calculated transaction. Washington leveraged Britain's desperate hour to dismantle their closed economic system, transferring ultimate global supremacy directly to America. The greatest military triumph in British history did not secure the future of its massive empire. It was the exact mechanism that tore it apart. By 1940, British forces had been pushed all the way back to the beaches of Dunkirk, and the Luftwaffe was relentlessly bombing London into ruins. Defiance alone doesn't manufacture bullets or build Spitfires. The United Kingdom was burning through cash at an unsustainable rate and simply ran out of the funds required to keep fighting. Recognizing the dire situation, U.S. President Franklin D. Roosevelt stepped in. He initiated the Lend-Lease program, shipping vital war material across the Atlantic. But Roosevelt was also looking out for American economic interests. In August 1941, Roosevelt and Prime Minister Winston Churchill met secretly aboard a warship off the coast of Newfoundland. They were there to draft the Atlantic Charter, outlining the strict conditions for ongoing American military aid. To keep the American weapons flowing, Roosevelt forced Churchill to agree to a post-war system defined by global free trade. For centuries, Britain had forced its vast network of colonies to trade almost exclusively with London. The U.S. was now prying those captive markets open. If Britain wanted to survive the Nazi onslaught, they had to sign away the very economic monopoly that funded their status as a global superpower. By the time the dust settled in 1945, the financial damage was irreversible. The British government no longer had the money or the military manpower to enforce their authority over territories thousands of miles away. The most immediate pressure came from their most valuable territory, India. During the conflict, the British relied heavily on the subcontinent, drawing 1.4 million Indian soldiers to fight in theaters from North Africa to Burma. In exchange for this massive contribution, Indian leaders demanded total independence. The British had resisted these demands for years, but following the 1946 elections, where pro-independence parties swept the vast majority of seats, the shattered British government had no choice but to announce their formal withdrawal. What followed was a highly chaotic partition, hastily splitting the region into a Hindu-majority India and a Muslim-majority Pakistan. Millions of people suddenly found themselves on the wrong side of poorly drawn borders, sparking a deadly migration that claimed an estimated 1 million lives. India gained its independence in August 1947. The loss of the empire's ultimate prize sent a clear, undeniable message across the globe. London could no longer dictate the fate of its colonies. The final test of Britain's fading authority arrived in 1956. The Suez Canal was a critical artery for international shipping and served as the absolute lifeline for Britain's remaining fragile trade economy. That economic lifeline was suddenly threatened when Egyptian leader Gamal Abdel Nasser boldly nationalized the waterway, taking direct control of the canal. Desperate to protect their commercial interests and project their former strength, Britain secretly conspired with France and Israel. They launched a massive military invasion of Egypt to forcibly take the canal back. While the military operation initially succeeded, it triggered a furious response from Washington. U.S. President Dwight D. Eisenhower had intentionally not been consulted, and he worried this aggressive imperial action would drive Arab states straight into alliances with the Soviet Union. When Britain refused to halt the invasion, Eisenhower deployed America's ultimate weapon, pure financial leverage. He threatened to sell off massive U.S. reserves of the British pound, a move that would instantly collapse the British currency. He also blocked the UK from accessing emergency loans from the International Monetary Fund. Faced with total economic ruin, Britain was forced into a humiliating withdrawal. The Suez Crisis proved that London could no longer operate independently on the world stage. The United States now held absolute veto power over global military and economic affairs. Seeing Britain publicly disciplined by its own ally exposed the reality of European weakness. Throughout the 1950s and 60s, an unstoppable wave of independence movements rapidly washed across British territories, leading to massive celebrations of self-rule in nations like Ghana. This process cascaded through the ensuing decades, from Malaya to Cyprus, and across the Caribbean and African continents. Local leaders replaced the fading colonial administrators, building entirely new sovereign states. The final curtain call for the empire arrived in 1997. In a highly publicized ceremony, the British Union Jack was lowered, and control of Hong Kong was formally handed over to China, marking the definitive end of Britain's global territorial presence. Great Britain entered the 20th century as the undisputed master of the globe, but to survive the existential threat of Nazi Germany, they had to mortgage their empire to the United States to fund their own defense. They traded their global dominance for their very survival. The modern world, characterized by independent nation-states and American economic supremacy, was built directly on the ruins of the British Empire.